The first person I ever called when life fell apart was my mother. The last person who ever called me when her own life might be falling apart was me. That wasn't luck. That was 53 years of love coming full circle. My name is Wesley Carter. I'm 53 years old. I live just outside Hartford, Connecticut, and I've always believed that family isn't measured by words. It's measured by who shows up when everything goes wrong. My mother, Rebecca Carter, had spent her entire life showing up. She never missed one of my Little League games, even when she worked double shifts. She packed my lunches long after I was old enough to do it myself, because she said a mother never really stops being a mother. When my father passed away 12 years earlier, she never complained. She quietly sold his second pickup truck to pay the funeral expenses before I even knew she was struggling financially. Every Sunday, no matter how tired she was, there was always food on her table for anyone who walked through her front door. That was simply who she was. She never asked people to love her. She just loved them first. So when my phone rang at exactly 7:41 on a Wednesday morning, and I saw Mom on the screen, I answered before the second ring. Wesley. Something about her voice made my stomach tighten. My mother didn't sound weak. She had survived losing her husband, raising a family, and 2 major surgeries without asking anyone for sympathy. But this voice, it was different. Mom, what's wrong? I don't want to bother you, sweetheart. You never bother me. I've been feeling pressure in my chest, and my left arm feels strange. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I'm coming right now. After hanging up, I grabbed my truck keys. Then reality hit me. My Silverado wasn't in the driveway. It had been sitting at Johnson Auto Repair since the day before, because the alternator had failed. They wouldn't have it ready until Friday. For exactly 2 seconds I stood there trying to figure out another way. Then I remembered. My wife Eve's Honda CR-V was parked outside with a full tank of gas. Problem solved. Or at least, that's what I believed. I hurried upstairs. Eve. The shower was running. Eve. A few seconds later the water stopped. What? She called back, sounding more irritated than concerned. I need your car. The bathroom door opened. She stood there, wearing a robe with a towel wrapped around her hair. My mom's having chest pain. I have to get her to St. Francis Hospital. She looked at me for a long second. Then she shrugged. I can't today. I blinked. What do you mean you can't? I have meetings all morning. Eve. My mother's left arm is going numb. I heard you. Her expression never changed. Call an ambulance. You know she hates ambulances after what happened to Dad. She folded her arms. Then call someone else. I stared at her. For 11 years we had been married. I'd seen her annoyed. I'd seen her angry. I'd even seen her cry. But I had never seen this. Pure indifference. My mother may be having a heart attack. She sighed as if I had interrupted her morning routine over something trivial. Wesley, she's your mother, not mine. Then came 5 words I'll never forget. Figure it out yourself. She turned around and walked back into the bedroom. The door closed softly. No yelling, no argument, just complete emotional silence. Somehow, that hurt more. I stood there for several seconds staring at the closed door. Then I pulled out my phone. There was only one person I knew would answer. Clinton Harris, a retired electrician who lived 4 houses away from my mother. 72 years old, never in a hurry, never too busy. He answered on the first ring. Wes, everything okay? My mom's having chest pain. My truck's in the shop. I need help. There wasn't even a pause. I'm leaving now. I'll be there in 4 minutes. That's all he said. No questions. No excuses. Just 4 minutes. Exactly 3 minutes and 45 seconds later, Clinton's old Honda pulled into my mother's driveway. By the time I got there, Mom was sitting on her front porch wearing her favorite blue coat. She smiled when she saw me. I'm sorry to trouble everyone. I knelt beside her. You've spent 53 years taking care of me. Today it's my turn. Her eyes watered just enough for me to notice. During the drive to St. Francis Hospital, she apologized at least 6 different times. To me, to Clinton, even to the traffic. Clinton finally laughed. Rebecca, if this is the biggest interruption I have today, I'll call it a good day. She smiled. The tension eased for just a moment. At the emergency room, the nurses moved quickly. An EKG, blood work, more tests. Within minutes, they took her through the double doors while I waited outside. Hospitals have a strange way of making time feel different. 10 minutes feels like an hour. An hour feels like an entire day. I sat there staring at the closed doors, replaying one sentence over and over inside my head. Not my problem. Those 4 words refused to leave me alone. Not because they were cruel, because they were honest. For the first time in 11 years, I realized something I had been refusing to see. It wasn't just about my mother. It wasn't even about that morning. It was about every excuse I'd made. Every time I'd convinced myself that Eve would be different when it truly mattered. Maybe. I'd been lying to myself for a very long time. Dr. Raymond Collins finally stepped into the waiting room just after 11 o'clock. His expression wasn't panicked, but it wasn't relaxed either. Mr. Carter? I stood before he finished saying my name. Your mother experienced a mild cardiac event. It wasn't a full heart attack, but it was close enough to remind us that her heart has been under serious stress. I closed my eyes for a second. Is she going to be okay? He nodded. She's stable. We'd like to keep her overnight for observation and adjust a few medications. Stable. It was the most beautiful word I'd heard all day. When I entered her room, Mom smiled like she was the one comforting me. I guess I scared you. You did. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You came. Just 2 simple words. But they carried 53 years of memories. Every scraped knee, every graduation, every birthday, every moment she'd shown up for me without ever asking for anything in return. I'll always come, I whispered. She smiled and closed her eyes. That should have been the end of the hardest part. Instead, it was only the beginning. I stayed beside her until late afternoon. Eve never called. Not once. No text asking if Mom was okay. No message checking whether I needed anything. Nothing. Around 4 o'clock, Mom looked at the empty chair beside my bed. Eve didn't come. It wasn't a question. I looked down. She had dinner plans. Mom stayed quiet for several seconds. She didn't criticize Eve. She didn't complain. She simply turned toward the window and nodded once. That silence said more than any argument ever could. I knew my mother. When she became quiet, she had already made up her mind. The next morning, I returned before 8. Clinton drove me again without hesitation. He didn't ask for gas money. He didn't ask how long we'd stay. He simply showed up. Some people don't need speeches to prove who they are. Their actions say everything. Mom looked much stronger. She was sitting upright wearing her own blue nightgown instead of the hospital gown, working on a crossword puzzle. Without looking up, she smiled. 6 letters. I laughed. What? A word for someone who keeps every promise. I smiled. Loyal. She wrote it into the puzzle. Perfect. For a few minutes, everything felt normal again. Then she closed the puzzle book. Wesley, I'd like to call Paul. I knew exactly who she meant. Paul Henderson, the attorney who had handled my father's estate years earlier. You don't have to worry about legal paperwork right now. She looked over her reading glasses. Wesley Carter. She used my full name. Whenever Mom used my full name, the conversation was already over. Please call him. I nodded. An hour later, Paul arrived carrying a leather briefcase. He greeted Mom warmly before taking a seat beside her bed. I understand you'd like to update your estate plan. I would, she answered without hesitation. I've spent my entire life building something with my husband. She looked toward me. I want everything we've built to go where it belongs. Paul quietly opened his notebook. For nearly 40 minutes they reviewed every document. The house, savings, investments, my father's restored classic Mustang, family jewelry, everything. I remained silent in the corner. It wasn't my conversation. It was hers. When they finally finished, Paul carefully organized the paperwork before closing his folder. Everything will be legally filed this afternoon. Mom smiled peacefully. Thank you. After he left, I looked at her. You really didn't have to do that. She shook her head. I'm not doing this because I'm angry. I'm doing it because I've had enough years to recognize the difference between family and convenience. I couldn't answer. Because she was right. Friday morning, the hospital discharged her. I finally picked up my repaired truck before driving straight to bring her home. The moment I started the engine, my phone lit up. Eve. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, she called again, then again, then again. By the time I reached the hospital, I had 11 missed calls. Mom noticed my phone lighting up over and over. She never asked who it was. She already knew. We drove home together. I made her favorite chamomile tea, organized every prescription on the kitchen table, checked the refrigerator, adjusted the thermostat, made sure she wouldn't need anything overnight. She watched quietly while I moved around the house. Finally, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Wesley. Yeah, Mom? You've spent a long time carrying your marriage by yourself. I looked away. She continued gently. A good husband keeps showing up. She squeezed my hand. But a good husband deserves someone who shows up for him too. The room became completely silent, because deep inside, I already knew she was telling the truth. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Call number 29. I turned the phone face down. Not yet, I said quietly. Mom smiled. Sometimes the loudest answer is silence. For the first time in years, I believed she was right. When I finally pulled into my driveway that afternoon, my phone showed 34 missed calls. Every one of them was from Eve. For 2 days she hadn't asked whether my mother was alive. Now she suddenly couldn't stop calling. I sat in my truck for nearly a minute before walking inside. The house was unusually quiet. Eve was sitting on the edge of the couch, fully dressed, her phone clutched tightly in both hands. She looked exhausted. The confidence she normally carried was gone. The moment she saw me, she stood. Wesley, thank God, I've been trying to reach you. I noticed. I hung my truck keys on the hook by the front door and waited. She swallowed hard. Paul Henderson's office called. I nodded once. They said your mother changed everything. I know. Her voice became shaky. Wesley. She removed me completely. I looked at her calmly. She did. There was a long silence. Finally, she whispered. I didn't think she'd actually do it. I stared at her for several seconds. You didn't think she'd notice. Her eyes dropped toward the floor. It wasn't like that. No? My mother was in the emergency room because her heart was failing. You chose dinner. You told me to figure it out. Tears filled her eyes. I made a mistake. I shook my head slowly. No. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did was a choice. You heard exactly what was happening. You understood the situation. And you still decided your plans mattered more. She covered her face with one hand. I've apologized 100 times in my head, but not to my mother. She couldn't answer, because there wasn't an answer. The truth had already spoken for itself. After a long silence, she finally looked back at me. Please, talk to Rebecca. Tell her I was overwhelmed. Tell her I didn't mean it. I took one slow breath. My mother has spent 82 years showing up for everyone she loves. She has never once chosen convenience over family. She didn't change her will because she hates you. She changed it because she finally accepted who you really are. Those words landed harder than shouting ever could. She sat back down, staring at the floor. I've ruined everything, I answered honestly. No. You revealed everything. Another silence filled the room. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was my mother. Hope immediately returned to her face. She looked at me. Should I answer? I remembered another phone call. The one from 2 mornings earlier. An 82-year-old woman asking her only son for help because her chest hurt. I remembered standing at the bottom of the stairs. I remembered hearing, "Not my problem." I picked up my truck keys again. I'm going to check on my mother. As I reached the front door, Eve's voice cracked behind me. Wesley. I turned one last time. For the first time in 11 years, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't even feel disappointed. I simply felt finished. You should answer that phone. Then I walked out the door. The January air was cold, but somehow lighter than it had felt in years. As I drove toward my mother's house, I realized something that had nothing to do with money or inheritance. The will hadn't ended my marriage. It had simply exposed it. For years, I had convinced myself that keeping the peace meant protecting love. I was wrong. Real love doesn't have to be protected from kindness. It doesn't disappear the moment someone needs you. My mother had spent more than 5 decades teaching me that without ever saying the words. She lived it every single day. When I arrived, she was sitting on her front porch with a blanket over her lap and a cup of tea in her hands. She smiled the moment she saw my truck. I knew you'd come. I laughed softly. You always know. She patted the empty chair beside her. I sat down. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. We simply watched the neighborhood together. Finally, she looked at me. How are you? It was such a simple question, yet nobody had asked me that in a very long time. I answered honestly. I think I'm finally seeing my life clearly. She nodded. Sometimes a hard day gives us a clear heart. I smiled. You always have the right words. No, she smiled back. I've just lived long enough to know what matters. She reached over and squeezed my hand exactly the way she had when I was a little boy. Wesley, you've always been the kind of man who shows up. Never settle for someone who treats that like it's ordinary. I felt my throat tighten. I won't. She looked out across the quiet street. Your father used to tell me something. What was that? He'd say, character isn't revealed when life is easy. It's revealed when someone else needs you. I sat there thinking about those words. About Clinton leaving his house within 4 minutes. About the nurses who cared for strangers every day. About my mother, who never stopped putting others first. And about the woman waiting back at my house. For the first time, I understood that love without loyalty is only comfort. And comfort disappears the moment sacrifice is required. As the sun slowly settled over the neighborhood, Mom leaned her head gently against my shoulder. Neither of us said another word. We didn't need to. Some people spend their lives wondering what real wealth looks like. I already knew. It wasn't a house. It wasn't an inheritance. It wasn't a bank account. Real wealth is having someone who shows up when your world begins to fall apart. My mother had done that for me my entire life. Now, it was my turn.